But Libras are so pleasant and agreeable. Until you walk away. Like, your Libra partner will agree with everything you have to say to your face, then tell all their other lovers they have nothing in common with you. This is Saturn Girl, and I'm so excited. Why? Because it's time to say bye-bye to Sewer Girl Summer and hello to autoerotic autumn? Or maybe fapping fall. I don't know. I'm going to miss summer, though. It's when I can wear as little clothes as possible and get away with it. But alas, it's time to bid farewell to my filthy fashion. Until next year. But you know what that means, don't you? Happy autumnal equinox! It's when the sun enters Libra, the sign of his fall, and we fall into fall. Maybe that's why we call it fall. I don't know. I didn't bother looking it up. All I know is, for the next 4 months, I get to be one of those preppy ladies in Ugg boots with an oversized sweater, choking on a pumpkin spice latte. Stereotypes exist for a reason. Don't be mad at me for pointing them out. Be mad at yourselves for being so predictable. But let's look at the fun chart, shall we? You see, here is our all-seeing sun creeping up on Libra, kind of like Jaws. He's all like, doo-doo, 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 doo-doo. The sun has fallen into Libra, and he can't get it up. I mean, for Libra, falling typically means falling into codependency. Oh, Libra, how you gonna be in a committed relationship and still waiting for the right one? Like, you can only live happily ever after so many times before life reaches an unhappy ending. But Libras are so pleasant and agreeable. Until you walk away. Like, your Libra partner will agree with everything you have to say to your face, then tell all their other lovers they have nothing in common with you. And yeah, Libra is known for being a bit promiscuous. I mean, I'm a Libra moon and I've been through the zodiac more than Venus. If you know what I mean. But we can have lots of soulmates, right? And Libra gets a bad rap for being shallow. They don't judge you by the content of your character, but by the color of your outfit. And Libras are supposed to be so social, but they'll cancel plans on you 100 times and then get butt hurt when you stop inviting them. And Libra rules the butt, which is why so many of us have sweet asses. Everyone says Libras are so indecisive, but that's not true. They just decide to manipulate other people into making decisions for them. But seriously though, this is a very important event, and it's part of the foundation of all of astrology. What do I mean by that? Well, you better keep watching because in this video, we're going to explore the occult meaning of Libra and the fall equinox, which also means we need to explore the symbolism and the origin of the zodiac itself. You won't want to miss this. In fact, you better take notes. I promise, I'm not trying to sound arrogant. I assure you, it's completely effortless. But what is an equinox anyway? Well, equinox is Latin for equal night. Equinox. That's because this is the time of equal night and equal day, where neither light nor darkness dominate. Astronomically speaking, it's when the Earth's poles are tilted neither toward nor away from the sun. There are 2 equinoxes in the apparent annual passage of the sun, or what we call the solar cycle. That's Aries, which is the vernal or spring equinox, and Libra, which is the fall or autumnal equinox. The solstices, on the other hand, are when the Earth's poles are at their maximum tilt, either toward or away from the sun. During the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, the North Pole is tilted toward the sun, whereas at the winter solstice, it's tilted away. The word solstice also comes from Latin, sol meaning sun, and sistere meaning to stand still. So very literally, the sun stands still. That's because at the solstices, the sun appears to stand still for 3 days. Of course it rises and sets, but what I mean by this is that the sun moves neither up nor down on its arc for 3 days. In fact, at the solstices, ancient people used to say, "The sun stands still for 3 days." This may remind us of the Christian phraseology, "On the third day he rose again," in fulfillment of the scriptures. You see, it's this solar cycle, that is, the seemingly unchanging rhythm of the solstices and equinoxes, that is the basis for the entire zodiac, including its symbolism. The essence of astrology is light. And by that I mean the alternation between light and dark over the course of a solar year. And yeah, this symbolism comes from the Northern Hemisphere, where astrology was invented and where 90% of the fucking world lives. So just untwist your knickers and pay attention, please. As the sun makes its annual journey through the zodiac, the length of the nights and days change. We know the sun isn't actually moving. Rather, it's the Earth spinning on its axis as it orbits the sun, which creates this phenomenon of seasons. Of course, each season begins with a solstice or an equinox. That's because these are the climaxing places along the solar journey. The Aries or vernal equinox is when day and night are equal, but the sun is increasing in light towards the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. While the Libra or autumnal equinox is where day and night are equal once again, but the sun's light is decreasing towards the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. And this is where we get the symbolism of the zodiac from the sun. The sun defines the zodiac. And the sun was one of the primary deities in the pantheons of the ancient cultures that contributed to the creation of astrology. I'm talking about ancient Mesopotamian, ancient Egyptian, the Vedic culture, and ancient Greek. He was Utu in Sumerian, Shamash in Akkadian, Ra in Egyptian, Surya in Vedic, and Helios in Greek. The annual passage of the sun became symbolic for the life and death and eventual resurrection of the sun god. You may also notice the symbolism is depicted in the Christ story, and we'll talk more about that in just a bit. But in ancient astrology, the all-seeing sun came to represent the soul or spark of divine mind, the lofty aspirations and ambitions that one may have in a life. That's because ancient philosophies like Neoplatonism and Hermeticism considered this spark of mind to be a fragment of the divine within us. Therefore, the journey of the sun god, the waxing and waning of his light, became symbolic for what we call initiation. What, pray tell, is initiation? Well, for our purposes here, we'll simply define it as the maturation of consciousness. In this context, light is soul or consciousness, and dark is form or matter. So each solstice and equinox represent a stage in that maturation, which is the soul's quest to liberate itself from matter and reunite with its source. This is also reflected in Hermetic teachings. You can think of initiation like Christ's parable of the prodigal son. Pardon me, I was raised super Catholic, so I quote scripture like Satan. For those of you who don't know this story, a young man seeks to leave home to seek his fortune. He asks his father for his inheritance and then goes off to waste it on all sorts of sinful pleasures. Hard relate. He loses everything. Then one day he's so hungry that he ends up eating pig slop from a trough and suddenly comes to his senses. He's all like, "What the fuck am I doing? My father's servants eat better than this. I'll just go home and apologize, and I'll live in the servants' quarters. Their stale bread is better than this shit." As he approaches his old home, his father sees him from a distance and is overjoyed. He turns to his other son and says, "Yo, your brother's on his way home. This is wonderful. Go quickly, get all the good food, get out the good wine, invite all the guests, 'cause we're gonna have a party." Of course, the other son is a bit irked. He's all, "Yo, that irresponsible idiot didn't do anything. He squandered his whole inheritance. Why are you gonna throw him a party?" His father looks him tenderly in the eyes and says, "You don't understand. My son was dead, and now he's alive again." Jesus, I always get emotional telling that one. But to me, This story is an allegory for initiation. We leave our Father's home, our source, the place of light, and desire pulls us into darkness, into the depths of matter and experience, until we finally have that moment of clarity, and we begin to seek our source once again, and progressively reunite or re-identify with it, as we shed all the conditioning and attachments of the world that have held us back from reunion with our divine parent. And it's really interesting to note that the word religion also comes from Latin, re legare, to bind together again. And the word yoga is Sanskrit for union. So you see how this concept of becoming one with your source again is implicit in many spiritual traditions. As I said earlier, we can see this symbolism exemplified for us in the Christ story. The sun god is born in Aries, like the birth in Bethlehem. The birth of Christ, or the soul in you, in us. This is when the light begins to dominate the dark. He reaches maturity in Cancer, representing Christ's ministry, his Dharma. This is when the light is at its brightest, and we are about our Father's work. Then we get to Libra, the place of judgment, where the sun god or the Christ makes a clear and conscious decision to descend into the darkness of matter in order to redeem it. In the Gospels, Christ says that no one can take his life from him, but that he gives it up of his own free will and accord for the sake of others, to redeem them. And this is when the darkness begins to dominate the light. He then reaches the deepest, darkest point of the cycle at the winter solstice in Capricorn, the place of death and crucifixion, when the sun drops to its lowest point on its arc and occultly dies. It's after this darkest point that the light begins to wax, and the sun god continues his mysterious journey until eventually he's resurrected again at the Aries equinox, and the cycle begins anew. It's pretty interesting that we celebrate Easter, the resurrection of Christ, right around the spring equinox, isn't it? Now, if you've been following me for a while, then you know the zodiacal signs get their meanings from two primary places. Number one, the planets that rule them. And number two, their place in the solar cycle. That is, where they are relative to the solstices and equinoxes. Even the planetary rulers are determined by the sun, as we can see in the Thema Mundi, the hypothetical birth chart for the universe. Libra, therefore, gets most of its meaning from the fact that it's ruled by Venus, and that it always begins with the autumnal equinox. You can probably see the more personal and superficial meanings in there, right? I mean, my mommy Venus can be terribly shallow, can't she? But she also represents our social nature. And Libra is the social sign par excellence. Libra is also known for indecision, and we do have that whole equal night and equal day thing, don't we? But there's a deeper occult significance of this sign. It's the place of balance on the lower interlude, when the light is decreasing towards the place of death at the winter solstice. It represents that stage of development where neither soul nor form are in charge, and we have the opportunity to freely choose which direction we'll go in. This is reflected in the Hermetic teachings as well. We have to make a conscious choice to investigate our shadow, or what's unconscious in us, in order to die to it, and thereby redeem it. You see, Libra's about the resolution of opposites. Implied in the revelation of Libra is that opposites are interdependent and not really separate from one another at all. There's an esoteric mantra for Libra. It is, I tread the way that leads between the two great lines of force. What does that mean? You see, we continuously oscillate between contradictions. I like this. I don't like that. I am this. I'm not that. However, it becomes apparent that opposites are only opposites because of our relationship to them. Therefore, we choose to descend into darkness because we see the relationship between light and dark. They're not separate. Soul and body aren't separate. They are interdependent. And the light of realization comes in that interlude of darkness. Sounds kind of like the prodigal son eating his pig slop, huh? That's the choice to tread the space between. The liminal space. I much prefer the lingual space, if you know what I mean. For us, the choice is typically between soul and form, or aspiration and desire. And we choose the soul by shining the light of awareness upon the shadow within. Remember how Carl Jung famously said, "That which remains unconscious manifests outside as fate"? That means we keep going round and round the hamster wheel until we clearly see our predicament, as well as our virtual powerlessness to escape it. But we do have one superpower, the light of attention. Merely by learning to look, to observe without attachment, do we begin to see ourselves quite clearly. And then we progressively shed those layers of identification that have held us back from eventual reunion. When we perceive ourselves as separate beings, then we'll perceive existence in the same way. We unconsciously experience ourselves as separate from the world. But our goal is to be in the world and not of it, to feel ourselves breathing in all things, as all things live and breathe in us. And yet, at another turn of the spiral, there's an even deeper significance, the resolution of being and non-being. The 2nd century Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna famously said, "It exists is an eternalist view. It doesn't exist is an annihilationist idea. Therefore, the wise person finds recourse neither in existence nor non-existence." It sounds an awful lot like I tread the way that leads between the two great lines of force, doesn't it? You know, the liminal space. There's not much to say about all that because it has to do with emptiness. And we'll leave that for another talk at another time. But suffice it to say that before you can approach the contradiction of being, you must have cultivated a practical awareness of being within yourself. Ultimately, it's all nothing. And you can't say anything about nothing because there's nothing to say. You can only say what it's not. Remember how I mentioned earlier that the sun falls in Libra? That's because it's the point in the cycle when the sun's light no longer dominates. On the other hand, Saturn, the furthest visible object, and therefore the symbolic enemy of the sun, is exalted in Libra for the same reason. I'm Saturn girl. And we know that my grandmommy Saturn represents oppositions, long struggles, and death. Therefore, Saturn is like Pontius Pilate, the Roman judge who gave the people a free choice to condemn Christ, the solar Lord, to death. But as we've already said several times, it was Christ who made the free choice to give up his life. So this Libra equinox, let's keep in mind that there's always a choice. But until we've developed the capacity to freely choose, that choice will be made for us. And then we're doomed to being endlessly tossed about by the waves of fate. But through the effort of self-observation and developing self-awareness, we achieve the freedom to choose. It's by seeing that we're slaves to desire, that we begin to free ourselves from its grasp. And we gain a greater capacity for compassion as well. Because as we see that light waxing and waning in ourselves as our own solar Lord, we also begin to see it in others. We can't really know anyone until we know ourselves. And we can't really love until we see that our very nature is love. I've seen that I'm a mean, nasty, rotten, antagonistic person. And I love you. I may not know you, but I love you. Happy Equinox. Thank you for watching. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. And make sure to click the bell when you subscribe so that you get notified when my new videos drop. And I do the best readings. It's science. You can book through my website, saturngirl.org. And if you can't afford a reading right now, come to my live streams and get one for free. But you have to be subscribed to get notified about them. And please consider tipping me. It helps me make such wonderful content. You can give through super thanks below or become a member of my channel. And remember, I love you. You're beautiful. And have a wonderful whatever it is you're having.